The gate at the end of Delia Marsh's driveway was open, and 6 people were standing at it, not speaking. Being them, Obion County, Tennessee, was the color of dust. Corn stood 4 feet short of where it should have been in late July. But past the gate, water moved. A pond, full to the bank, rippled under a September sun, and something below the surface caught light like 100 small mirrors turning at once. Nobody at that gate had come to admire it. They had come because 2 months earlier, every one of them had said this pond would fail. But to understand what they were seeing, you have to go back 14 months, to the day Delia Marsh did something everyone in the county said was a mistake. Sometimes the thing everyone throws away is the only thing left that still works. Subscribe for more true stories like this, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Delia Marsh was 47 years old, a former school cafeteria manager who had retired early after 18 years, and she had inherited 11 acres and a half-acre pond from her father, who had died owing $3,100 on the property taxes. The land had grown nothing since 2019. Her son-in-law, Wyatt Colson, 29, had a degree in aquaculture science from a state college 2 counties over, a fact the neighbors mentioned the way they mentioned weather, politely. And without believing it mattered. Wyatt kept saying the pond was an asset, not a liability. Delia kept saying assets didn't pay property tax bills. One evening in May, sorting through her father's ledgers at the kitchen table, she said it without meaning much by it, something nobody wants still has a use for somebody. Wyatt didn't answer. He just wrote it down on a feed receipt and put it in his shirt pocket. The call came from the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife Hatchery 2 counties north. They had 4,000 tilapia fingerlings, culled for size irregularity. That they needed gone within the week or they'd be destroyed. Wyatt drove up and got them for $80 and a signed liability waiver. Feeding 4,000 fish was the real problem. Commercial tilapia feed ran close to 60 cents a pound, and Delia's bank account held $1,100. Wyatt had read a paper in graduate school on duckweed, a floating aquatic plant that grows across still water and carries a crude protein content between 35 and 43% by dry weight, comparable to soybean meal, and doubles its biomass in under 2 days under warm conditions. He seeded 300 square feet of the pond's shallow end with duckweed harvested from a drainage ditch behind the feed store. He said nothing to anyone about it. He just watched the green mat spread. Hollis Yoder, 61, had run catfish ponds in the county for 38 years and knew more about pond chemistry than the state extension office. He drove out in June, looked at the duckweed choking the shallows, and shook his head. That's not feed, son. That's a mess you're going to have to drag out of there come August. Wyatt said, we'll see how it looks in August. Hallie said, I've seen 100 ponds go green like that. Never seen one come back clean. By July, the local feed store had a name for it. They called it the junk pond. In late July, before anyone else was awake, Delia walked down to check the nets and found something she didn't mention to Wyatt for 3 days. The fingerlings, barely 2 inches when they arrived, were now closer to 5, dense in the water, moving with weight behind them. She didn't call Hollis. She didn't call her daughter. She stood at the edge of the pond for 11 minutes, said nothing, and went back inside to make coffee. August brought the worst drought Obion County had recorded in 41 years. The creek fed by the county reservoir dropped low enough that Delia's pond, spring-fed but shallow, lost 6 inches of depth in 9 days. Then the aerator pumps bearing ceased at 2 in the morning, and Wyatt drove 40 minutes to the only supplier still open, in Dyersburg, to find they didn't carry the part. He drove back with nothing. 3 days later, a rumor moved through the feed store that Delia was going to lose the whole pond and the bank was already circling the property. Delia didn't sleep for 2 nights straight, sitting up totaling numbers that never came out right, wondering if she had gambled her father's land on a plant she'd first heard of in May. Wyatt found her at the kitchen table at 4 in the morning and said only, the duckweed doesn't need the pump. It just needs sun. She didn't answer, but she went to bed. The pump got fixed 9 days later with a used part from a hog farm 40 miles east. Through all of it, the duckweed kept growing, the fish kept feeding on it for nearly free. And while 3 of Hollis's neighbors lost fish to heat stress from bought feed prices forcing them to cut rations, Delia's pond held steady. Hallie showed up unannounced on a Tuesday evening in September, without being asked, carrying a spare aerator diffuser he'd had sitting in his shop for 2 years. He knelt at the edge of the water, looked at it a long moment, and said, I was wrong about the green. Delia said, you weren't wrong about much else. Hallie installed the diffuser himself, working past dark, and left without staying for coffee. Within 3 weeks, 2 of Hollis's neighbors and 1 man from the feed store had walked down to Delia's pond to ask how the duckweed system worked. We had started a spiral notebook logging growth rates and feed costs. And by October the conversation at the feed store counter had changed from jokes about the junk pond to questions about where to get duckweed starter stock. Delia sold her first harvest, 1,140 pounds of tilapia, to a wholesaler in Union City for $2.10 a pound. What looked like a mess to everyone standing at that gate was never a mess at all. It was a plant nobody wanted, growing on fish nobody wanted, on a pond nobody believed in, and none of it needed permission to work, only time and someone willing to watch it. Delia's father used to say something nobody wants still has a use for somebody, and in September, standing at the edge of that pond with a check in her hand for a business that by year's end would clear over $110,000. She finally understood he hadn't just meant the land. If this reminded you that what looks worthless is sometimes just waiting to be understood, leave a comment below. Subscribe for more stories about people who were right before anyone else believed them.